What's up, guys? Wagaruji here with my first ever YouTube video going over my top 10 anime characters that would solo their own universe. Now, do keep in mind, this is my own opinion here, as well as my first video, so if you disagree, that's okay. Just make sure to let me know your list down in the comments. But otherwise, let's get straight into the video. Now, coming in at my number 10 spot here, we've got Lucy from Elfen Lied. Elfen Lied is like beyond all the over-the-top gore, violence, and otherwise extremely uncomfortable subject matter. It's a story defined both by the anti-hero Lucy's love for the protagonist of the story, Coda, as well as her desire to atone for her past sins against him. All the while, during the rest of the story, she's being hunted down by all these corrupt humans that are out to either take her life or repurpose it to suit their needs. Now, Lucy is a Diclonius, and that's an inverse being with essentially extra arms or appendages that are known as vectors that are normally invisible. And the power that she has using these extra appendages is unmatched when it comes to others of her race. Having free control over them within a 2-meter range from the beginning of the story, and later on, towards more the end of the manga and story, having enough control over them to threaten the entire planet as well as the human race using just these arms. She was also capable of spreading the Diclonius mutation essentially as a virus to humans via infecting their parents using her vectors, which is a process that was gradually capable of replacing regular humans with their kind. Albeit most of them would be sterile, rapidly growing variants of the race that would basically just act as drones that have to obey her will as the queen. But either way, this would obviously be an insanely strong ability and could easily spell the end for the human race, should she begin using it for its intended purpose. Alright, so on to number 9, we have Reiner Lute from Legend of the Legendary Heroes. Now, this anime is kind of like a cult classic. Some people do know about it, some people don't. A lot of people just know it from clips they've seen on Twitter, wherever. But in my opinion, this show is criminally underrated and deserves a way more recognition for just how fun some of these action scenes can be and how perfectly Reiner plays that role of a overpowered MC who likes to pretend they're average. So from an early age in this show, Reiner's powers forced him to distance himself from having any interpersonal relationships due to his lack of control and how easily his powers could quite literally destroy an entire kingdom. For a majority of this story, they do end up staying out of his control because of his fear of them and his want to just be seen as somebody who's normal in his verse. Eventually, he does end up getting put into a situation where he's facing people who have been given similar abilities and are almost on par with him. And essentially, he's forced into a situation where he simply accepts the fact that most normal people will always view him as a monster, but that the only opinions that matter are those of his own and his friends, allowing him to essentially ascend to an in-universe being known as a demon god with the nickname the Solver of All Equations, giving him the ability to instantly deconstruct all living beings and magics on an atomic level, as well as full control over all of his other latent abilities, making Reiner just insanely overpowered and easily capable of soloing any other being in his universe, including the two that pushed him to this state in the first place. Alright, so coming in at my number 8 spot, I've got Yato, or Yato Kami from the Noragami universe. He's the protagonist of the show. He likes to call himself the delivery god and a god of fortune. He can be mischievous, crude, unpredictable in his behavior, and even at other times rather childish and gullible. He really likes to just run around and think about himself in the future as being a super successful deity, lots of shrine maidens waiting on him hand and foot. But as we and some of the other characters who are not familiar with his past come to find out, he's actually one of the most feared and powerful of all the divine beings in his universe. And the Yato that we are familiar with for a majority of the show is actually just the version of himself that he becomes after trying to become his own person and leaving his divine or godly family. But as I said, he was previously known as one of the most violent and dangerous of all the divine beings, and he proves that he hasn't lost his edge when his former partner and equal challenges him to a one-on-one deathmatch, ending in his complete victory and the death of one more god, with even all the older gods once again being reminded of who it was that had slain so many of their kind in years past, with his expertly trained and savage swordsmanship being on full display. All I can say is, if he wants to be a delivery god, you should let him. Alright, so next up for my number 7 spot, we've got another one that, I don't think a lot of people know about, but everybody's familiar with like some really famous clips from it. We've got Saya Kisaragi from the anime Blood Sea. Now, right off the bat, she kind of comes off as somewhat of like a silly girl who just has like crazy impressive demon, or I guess in this universe, Elder Baron slaying abilities. But as the show goes on and the small world that she lives in continues to slowly devolve, with her friends dying in front of her and being forgotten by other people in this town that she lives in, and like a bunch of weird background memories leaking into her daily life, we come to realize that the Saya that we're actually familiar with is really just a facade that's been created by her captors, and she's actually one of the most, if not the most powerful being in her universe, with her blood actually being used to control all of the Elder Barons she's been fighting. And she was essentially captured by this shadow organization to discover how they could continue after the fact to keep using her blood to control these Elder Barons. Either way, with her supernatural swordsmanship and healing abilities, as well as the inherent ability that the whole premise of the show is based on, them controlling the Elder Barons with her blood, that puts her pretty high up in terms of her ability to actually destroy humanity, as well as any of the other beings in her universe, as she clearly demonstrates throughout a majority of the show. So coming in at my number 6 spot, we have Kuchinawa, or Sengoku Nadeko, from the Monogatari series. Now, in a show regarding the whims of deities and other beings on par with them, there are definitely plenty of options for the position of the strongest, but the clear winner in my mind is Kuchinawa. She was the only character in the show to challenge the MC Araragi and not in some way be defeated by force or strength, only having her assault stopped by the convincing of the con man Kaiki. Seeing as how she's one of the only characters to have literally become a god by the end of the show, we can definitely conclude that she is one of, if not the strongest character in this entire show. Alright, so next up for my number 5 spot, we've got Ichiryu from Toriko, the president of the IGO and the parental figure to all 4 of the main characters, the 4 Heavenly Kings. Known for going soft on all of his opponents, including his final one, Midora, his adoptive brother, this man was clearly at the peak of the gourmet fighting world. Instead of using his world-ending strength and mastery over all that involves food to defeat Midora, he decides to give him one last chance to change by making him regret Ichiryu's death, as well as inspiring further strength from his 4 children by sacrificing himself for the prosperity of their world. Later on, it is also revealed that Ichiryu was actually the reincarnation of the first son of the gourmet gods, with Midora being the second son's reincarnation, which clearly explains why his strength is just so outlandish compared to anybody else in verse, and why he could solo everyone, including his brother, should he actually try. Now, next up at my number 4 spot, we've got Luffy, Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece. Now, this is an easy choice for this list in my opinion, but it's only because recently he's been clearly shown to be capable of soloing his verse. As well, spoilers ahead for any non-manga readers, by the way, you've been warned. So, with Luffy awakening the Nika Nika no Mi, the true name of Luffy's Gum Gum fruit, he is transformed into literally a divine being of the One Piece universe, the bringer of light and smiles. And alongside his defeat of Kaido in a one-on-one bout, Luffy has deliberately placed himself as the strongest living being, as Kaido was previously that, and before him, Whitebeard and Goldie Roger, so on and so forth. But seeing as how they've all been knocked down at this point, Kaido was previously holding that position. Now Luffy has taken that from him. Now, I'm not saying he takes the place of greatest swordsman in the world or anything like that. Obviously, we've got Mihawk still there. Zoro's going to be taking his spot. Shanks, in terms of hockey, is still the strongest hockey user. But in terms of general strength, Luffy has now defeated the strongest living being. So in terms of actual power, Luffy should now be number one, or at least up there with the top few who are undefeatable in the One Piece world. So for my number 3 spot, we've got Jin Mori from God of High School. Jin Mori is your classic all that matters is strength and heart shonen anime MC, wanting nothing more than to fight stronger and stronger opponents. He joins the worldwide titular competition God of High School to find out who is truly the strongest of their generation. But little do any of the participants know, there are 2 powerful organizations backing this event trying to compete to find out who is an actual god among them. Now, obviously, Jin Mori being the MC, he is that character, he is that god, and he is later revealed to be Son Goku, the Monkey King, and enemy of heaven. Seeing as how every shonen anime ever is based off of this story, his power as this being is clearly there and doesn't really need to be elaborated on. But if you were unaware, in the traditional story Journey to the West, even Buddha comes to fear the power of the Monkey King, sealing him away for thousands upon thousands of years to atone for his sins of becoming the enemy of heaven. So Jin Mori, as this god, as this deity, this being, is clearly the strongest in this verse. Now, next up, we've got somewhat of a different choice from the rest of this list. We've got Lelouch v. Britannia from Code Geass. Now, just stick with me. This list is detailing characters that could solo their respective universes, and Lelouch is a prime candidate, seeing as how he did. All of his schemes and plans end up with the exact scenario that he planned for, with him having manipulated the entire world into doing his exact bidding and using the God-given powers of the Geass to control those who would not fall in line. Lelouch is not only able to gain the personal revenge on his family for utterly destroying him and all that he held dear, but is also able to bring about world peace and gift his crippled sister a world where she can live happily even after his ultimate passing. Lelouch, the king of 1,000 IQ plays, definitely belongs on this list and easily outplayed everybody in his verse. And for my number 1 spot, we've got another one with the same idea, Akagi Shigeru from the show Akagi, the greatest gambling mastermind of all time. Now, Akagi is definitely not a show where fighting in the traditional sense is what's on display, but like I said with Code Geass, this verse is all about wits, and Akagi, no matter the circumstance, shows that his latent ability far surpasses even the most diabolical master of Mahjong. Using his innate talent for manipulating the overconfident, entrenched gamblers of the Mahjong world, Akagi escapes this underworld cesspool not only with his life, but with the dignity and fortunes of many of the top-level Yakuza bosses and gambling hosts of this verse's depiction of Showa-era Japan. In terms of verses being soloed, this man didn't even have to try, making him the most obvious number 1 and ending our list with a solid recommendation if you haven't already seen this masterpiece. But anyway, guys, for this list, that's my top 10. If you would have arranged any of this differently or disagree with my picks, definitely let me know in the comments, but please be civil. Otherwise, I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one. Wagaruji out.